Hey ya yo, 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 hawe ya ne, ho ya ne, hawe ya ne. Oyane we ha Yaho ganewa Hoyane Yaho ganewa Hoyane Yaho ganewa Hoyane Yaho ganewa Hoyane we ha No ya hey hey no hey ya 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 no ya hey we ha we ya na we ya na we ya na we ya na oh ya ne we ya na we ya na we ya na oh ya ne we ha yo ho he ho 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 e do ga ho ne ho yo
Osio Eli Chalugi. This is Mashu Whitefeather, and we are broadcasting our Indigenous Voice Radio tonight. I'd like to introduce you to our guest, my co-host, Doreen Bennett. Osio Eli Kia ora, Doreen.
Kia ora, Mashu. Tēnā koutou katoa, and hello and welcome to our show. My name is Doreen Bennett, and I'm coming from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Kaupai, Ostadam. And I'd also like to introduce, which I don't think we have, Doreen, in previous shows, but we have a third person that's a part of our group. His name is Chimmy Bennett, and he does more of the behind the scenes. And we don't want him to feel neglected at all. So I'm mentioning him now. And thank you for all the work that you're doing behind the scenes for us, Chimmy.
Yes.
And before we introduce our guest, I'd like to again say our lead-in song is the welcoming, or what we call the gathering song, done by Bo Taylor, and it comes from his album, Rebuilding the Fire. Our subject tonight, amongst other things, will be primarily our Cherokee language, and our guest this evening, Tim Nuttle, is a member of the Echota Cherokee of Alabama, and he just returned yesterday from a week, I think, being out with the Western Band in Oklahoma in an immersion language situation or class. And so, Tim, Chalugi.
Kia ora, Tim.
Sio.
Yo. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about this immersion class or course you went to in Oklahoma?
Well, let's see. My family is from Tennessee, Alabama area, and I grew up learning my Cherokee culture from my grandmother, Chiesa.
Oh.
And when she passed, I found that I needed to take more affirmative steps to be connected to the broader Cherokee culture. So I did some investigation with the Eastern Band in North Carolina. Spent a part of a summer there volunteering for them. I actually lived in a teepee on the Qualla boundary. So Cherokees say that we never lived in teepees, but I have to say that I'm a Cherokee and I lived in a teepee for a summer on the I had the resiest teepee on the boundary, though, because I had teepees are not very good accommodations in the rainy Smoky Mountains. So I tied up a blue plastic tarp over the smoke hole to keep the rain out.
Isn't that called an ozone?
I don't know. But they were there for the tourists who were expected to, Indian chiefs and teepees on Indian reservations. So I began studying Cherokee language then, and kind of life took a turn in other directions for a while, and recently I've been able to take it up more in earnest. And last week I was at an immersion language camp hosted by the Squirrel Ridge Gautier ceremonial grounds in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. And we took the whole family there, my partner and my two boys, and a week at the Stomp Grounds, learning Cherokee and learning Cherokee culture and getting connected to the people there.
Very good. How did the boys? Did the boys like it there?
They did. They spent most of the time playing. They learned how to play stickball. There were other kids there. So they came in and out of the classes, one more than the other. So I think that they had a good time. They want to go back.
That's great. Tim, I also have a teepee, and I've had one for years. And that's what we always took to powwows, knowing that our people traditionally never had teepees. But I'm also an 8th Osage, so that was my out on that.
Okay.
That was my excuse. So now you are currently also working on a new Cherokee English dictionary. Am I correct?
Well, yes. Actually, it's the Cherokee English Dictionary by Durbin Feeling was published in 1975 and has been in print off and on since then. It's a great resource. It's a full dictionary with verb conjugations and grammatical explanations, and can really form the basis for studying the Cherokee language. But the problem is that since it was published in 1975, it's not available in digital form. And it's available as scanned copies if you know the right people, but because of various typographical, superscript, subscript, special characters, things like that, it doesn't do the optical character recognition very well. So I wanted to, I was asking around to see if this was available in a digital searchable format somewhere, to help with looking words up and understanding how to translate text, things like that. And it was really only available as this, basically photographs of the pages, as a PDF file. And so I was asking around to see if anyone had available a digital copy, and people said, well, no, you'd pretty much have to type the whole thing out, and who's going to do that? So I decided, hey, you know what? If we just sort of crowdsource this and get a bunch of people on Facebook groups to take 10 pages each, we could get this done in no time. And that's what I did. I set up a structure, looked for volunteers. I'm in some Cherokee language Facebook groups. asked for volunteers, and took a couple weeks, and we've basically got the entire dictionary typed out. We have a database programmer whose name is Tim Orr, who's a Cherokee from lives in Missouri, and he's doing the programming, and we hope to launch a website where people can search for Cherokee words, and we can add to the dictionary from other sources, not just the Durban Feeling Dictionary.
Oh, wow.
Oh, very good. Now, I know for myself, when I was younger, I'm told that I was very fluent in our Eastern dialect, in the Gadua dialect. But as we were growing up, we were told not to speak our language, and especially around the non-Indigenous people. And so I'm not fluent anymore. And I'm sure I have a problem, just as many other people that are trying to learn the language, is that you can read it and you can pronounce it, but then you don't hear the vocals that go behind it. You know, you have to. I'm one that has to hear, you know, where to put the accents and stuff. So, do you find that to be a problem as well?
Yes. When I was studying at first, I could, you know, like you said, I could read, and I know the syllabary. For some of your listeners might not know, we have our own Cherokee writing system, which is a syllabary of letters that make up syllable sounds like ga, ka, ge, gi, etc. Ma, me. So you can only do so much with book learning, and I've taken some courses online through Cherokee Cherokee Nation. But you listen to the instructor, but the format doesn't allow you to get oral feedback. You can type in questions and get feedback that way, but it really helps to be able to get feedback on how you're pronouncing things, because your ear is different. Your ear is trained by the language you have experience with, and so it was really helpful in the immersion class to get the feedback from the instructor and the other people there with experience speaking the language, that I was pronouncing certain things slightly wrong, or totally wrong for that matter.
And you will be doing that if you're not around people where that speak it every day. You have to hear how it sounds. Now, you were mentioning the syllabary. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. Our syllabary is of, I think, 86 symbols that represent every sound in our language. And our vowel sounds, unlike English, in English it's A-E-I-O-U, but in our Cherokee, it's like every other language of the world. It's A-E-O-U, but being a sophisticated people, this is where you agree with me, Tim, we have an extra sound that's a nasal sound, and it's So you would be like A-E-O-U, and on down through all of the words, or the sounds of our language. And you can speak our whole language without your lips coming together, unless you either want water or salt. Because we don't use that M sound very much. Now,
actually, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I was so keen to meet you, Tim, and talk with you on here, only because language has been something that our people have been fighting for the last 30-odd years before we lost it. And there was a huge danger that we would lose our language in the 1970s. So it's just so cool to hear someone talk about another language, that you're just doing it because you need to learn. You're doing a dictionary, and we've got a couple of Maori people here that have done a dictionary with dialect. Taranaki region on our North Island on the west coast have revived the Taranaki language. But you talked about you learnt from your grandmother. Your grandmother's generation, were they told not to speak their language?
Well, I believe that my grandmother did not grow up speaking the language. She moved as a young girl from Alabama and Tennessee up to Michigan. So Alabama and Tennessee are in the south of the United States, and Michigan is in the north. And during the Great Depression era, a lot of people moved from the south to move up north to work in the automobile industry. And my grandmother's entire extended family moved. Her grandmother, her aunts and uncles, her parents all moved from Tennessee and northern Alabama up to Michigan. So they became isolated from the broader Cherokee community there and the Indian community there. And there was a long history of colonization in the eastern United States. So a lot of people, even back 200 years, a lot of Cherokee people didn't speak Cherokee language, or at least not very well. And so that's kind of the history that my family comes from. Now, there's other Cherokees who did grow up in a more Cherokee language speaking community, but it's really this generation of maybe 50-year-old people or parents now who don't speak the language. So we have most of our Cherokee speakers are over 50 years old, 50 to 60 years old, and they're not passing those down to children because they don't have children themselves. Their children have already grown, and they were told not to teach the language to their children because they wanted their children to have advantages of being part of the broader American society, and they felt at that time that growing up speaking Cherokee was not a thing of value, that you needed to integrate and assimilate, acculturate, and that would be the way to get out of poverty and have a chance for your future.
Yeah.
So now we do have a sizable population of Cherokee people that speak Cherokee language, but they're all older. Most of them, I shouldn't say all, but most of them are older, and they don't have children themselves. They have grandchildren, but the way to save a language is you've got to teach the kids.
That's right, and that's what we've done here. It was my parents and my grandparents that weren't allowed to speak our language. By my generation, which I think I'm now in the 50-year-olds, my generation, we sort of got a taste of it, but it hasn't been until our kids, my two girls, and I've got three grandchildren. Now, it's that generation that's going to be fluent, if not semi-fluent, if not fluent. So it's just interesting to hear, like, your language has still survived, regardless of having 500 or 600 years of occupation, European occupation. So that's just amazing that it survived, be it might be a little bit disjointed, but it's still, the basis has survived, and now you're doing the dictionary, plus you've got immersion programs. And I was lucky enough to go to Cherokee in North Carolina with mashu. And we heard one of the schools where the kids were speaking Cherokee. And that was so neat to hear.
It's nice to hear the little ones speak the language. At our immersion class, some of the kids who live there in North Carolina, we have in Cherokee Nation, we have immersion elementary schools and preschools and up to middle school, and then similar programs in Cherokee, North Carolina. So maybe some of your listeners don't know that there are two main communities of Cherokees, some in the old Cherokee territory that has been our place on the planet for thousands of years, and our original homeland, that's in the North Carolina, Tennessee, northern Alabama, southern Appalachian Mountains area. And then in the 1830s, our people were forced to move, most of them were forced to move west to Indian Territory, which is now the state of Oklahoma. So you've got these two communities, that most people actually, Cherokee people, are in Oklahoma, or they're descended of people who had to move to Oklahoma. So there's two main Cherokee communities. There's the Cherokee Nation, and there's the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. There are other outlying communities here and there of people who did not remove to the west. But the two main communities have the Cherokee language immersion schools for children, and those are really neat programs. They are staffed by first language Cherokee speakers, so people who grow up with Cherokee as their first language primarily. Those are the teachers, and those they're teaching the children. From the moment the kids get dropped off in the morning, they are entirely in Cherokee language. And so seeing these little girls that were at the immersion camp with their dad is a second language learner, but the little girls, they're growing up bilingual. And they could speak Cherokee just fine. It was really cute to see these little girls, 5 years old or 7 years old, speaking Cherokee.
Tim, is the United Ketua out there? That's the other federally recognized bunch in Oklahoma. Do they also have immersion schools? Do you know?
I don't know if they do, actually. That's a good question. Yeah, that is a very good question. I don't know. I know that they have language instruction. The really neat thing about the classes there, at least in Oklahoma, is they're all free and open to anybody.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Wow.
So even the people that are not enrolled in the tribe can take the classes.
Well, that's something that we'll have to look into, Doreen.
They have, and I was just looking at. There's a schedule that just came out of classes for adults that are being taught, and some of the teachers are United Ketua Band, and some of them are Cherokee Nation Band, and they're all at local community centers across the Cherokee Territory in Oklahoma, and anyone can come.
When Doreen was over here, we had taken her and we spent like 2 or 3 days up on the Qualla in North Carolina, the reservation there, and we did run into and speak with Bo Taylor. And he does a lot of the language there up in Cherokee, North Carolina. He was telling us of a 10-day immersion course for $500 that we could go in, and he promised us that we would walk away, eat, sleeping, drinking, and dreaming in Cherokee. But Doreen and I had considered going to that one, but, aside from the $500 for the course, you have 10 days that you need to find lodging and food.
Right. Right.
That was the drawback for there. And, I've moved to a state now where we have lottery, and I haven't won enough to go yet. So maybe we'll slide on down to Oklahoma, and then we can correct ourselves for Eastern dialect when we learn the Western. Now, the other thing...
Isn't it wonderful, Mashu, where you can learn online?
Tim and I have had this discussion. I don't do well learning online. I need to have somebody there that I can hear and I can have feedback. I'm old way. And now I remember growing up, my grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side told me that you don't want to learn the syllabary and stuff. You want to learn the language first, and then you learn the syllabary, because then once you get the language down, the syllabary is easy to learn. I think it's just been within recent years, Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they started teaching the syllabary with the language. And I've always gone by what the elders said, So they said, what was it, when Sequoia came out with the first syllabary, it had to be approved by tribal council. And then it took, I think, the slowest learner of our people only like 2 to 3 weeks to become, really fluent in writing the syllabary. And then that was another reason that non-Cherokee people wanted us out of the way, because in the mid to late 1800s, our people were literate bilingually, whereas a lot of the non-indigenous people were not. A lot of them couldn't even read and write back then, so that was another reason to want us out of the way. That's the story I heard that I'm passing on.
Well, I think if you look at some older textbooks, like the Beginning Cherokee, it doesn't really introduce the syllabary until later chapters, as I recall. That's the book that came out in the 70s.
I got that one.
Yeah, and but if you look at more recent learning materials, they introduced the syllabary right away. Now, I've heard, and I think I saw this from Michael Joyner's work. He's working on some textbooks, Cherokee language textbooks based on the Cherokee English Dictionary by Durbin Feeling. His point is, if you were to learn Russian language, you wouldn't learn Russian language with Latin letters. You would learn it in Russian Cyrillic alphabet right away. Mm-hmm. No one's writing Russian in Cyrillic in Latin alphabet, right? So likewise in Cherokee, the philosophy is that the syllabary was designed for the Cherokee language, and you can really access a lot of material that's older if you know the syllabary. So, for example, I can write the syllabary. Like if I hear someone say something, I did this last week in the class. There was a song, and I learned the song, and I just wrote it all out in syllabary. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you would write it in Latin letters because, the spelling rules are a little weird in Latin letters. Mm-hmm. So there's advantages to both, and I got it all right. It was, I didn't make any mistakes.
Great.
And because it's easy, because the syllabary fits the language. There's some subtleties in pronunciation that you can make more explicit with the Latin letters that you can't really do in the syllabary unless you add certain diacritical marks or such, accent marks, things like that. But by and large, and there's not really set spelling rules. So, for example, is the syllable la or li? Well, you could use either, and neither one is right or wrong. If you can read it and it makes sense.
But what we might also add right here, Tim, is that with our Cherokee language, there are 3 dialects. There's the Eastern, the Western, and the Alate, mm-hmm. which I think is closer to the Chickamauga line of the Cherokee. Is that correct?
Well, right. So there's lower, middle, and upper dialect. Mm-hmm. Upper dialect would be, or Overhill is, most of the Cherokees lived in the Overhill region, which would be Overhill, the hills being the Appalachian Mountains, the Allegheny Ridge there. So the people who live in Tennessee and northern Alabama would have mostly spoken Overhill. That is, by and large, what they speak in Oklahoma, although there are pockets of people who speak slightly differently depending on where their family came from. Mm. Then there's the middle dialect, which is the Overhill dialect / Western dialect is called Otali in the Cherokee language. The middle dialect is called Gadua, and that is the dialect they speak mostly in North Carolina, although there is a pocket of people near Snowbird who speak something closer to the Otali or Overhill dialect. Mm-hmm. Then there is the Eladi dialect, or Lower Cherokee, that had a few important differences. The most prominent one being they had an R sound instead of an L sound. So the two extant dialects do not have R sounds, but the lower dialect has an R sound. So instead of Cherokee, we would be Chalake. Mm-hmm. So that's a different sound. So the lower dialect, or the Eladi dialect, was spoken in sort of northern South Carolina or western South Carolina, and this dialect died out in the early 1900s. So there are no living speakers of that dialect anymore.
There's not.
That's at least not that anyone knows about.
Geez, that's sad.
Yeah.
I always grew up hearing that one of our dialects, and over time I forgot which one it was, that it was dying out. It was the fastest one that was dying out. But I was also told that this was the one where most of our prayers and our haiukus, our priests, would speak, and that had only certain words that only the uku could use. Is that the dialect you're speaking of?
I don't know about that. I know that a lot of times they say that there's ceremonial songs that can't be easily translated because they're thought to be very old. So what they were saying at the ceremonial grounds during my immersion camp was, if we know what the words are, it means it's relatively recent in a song.
And the other thing too, is with the smallpox and the genocide of our people, and especially during the smallpox time, we lost a lot of our songs and things, that would have naturally been handed down, I think. And then we went where we had to, a lot of our people even today still hide who they are. And I know in the South even today, in Alabama, because that's where I was living, I can tell you more about that part of it. And I've mentioned on the show before, up until 1967, if you were known to be Cherokee, you could lose your property, your home, and your livestock. And also up until 1981, if more than 2 indigenous people were seen on the street talking, you could be arrested. So there's a lot of our people down there that if they could pass themselves off for whatever, from mulatto to, if you hear the term Black Dutch, then those are more than likely Cherokee, or if they could pass themselves off even as white, they would do that, and it was to save their families. And what's sad for me is to go down there and see a 90-something-year-old woman at a powwow in a wheelchair for the first time say that she says, they can't do anything to me now, and I'm admitting right now that I'm Cherokee. And she was full blood. And that broke my heart, to see somebody live their whole life in that kind of fear. So, and people will do whatever they need to do. I don't care what background you come from, to save and protect the family. And this is, a lot of people say that our culture doesn't exist. It does exist, but a lot of it went underground, and it's still there. And we're, I think, within the last probably 15, 20 years, from what I've seen in my own personal perspective, is that it's coming out. It's coming to the surface again, and this is really good. And a lot of it is thanks to people just like Tim, who's taken the initiative to do, like this dictionary and making it digital where it's more accessible. And then like out in Oklahoma, where the people are offering it free. That's been a dream of mine, because I feel it's a birthright to all of our people to know their language, and we should not have to be charged for it. So I applaud you so much on that, Tim.
Can I tell you a traditional story?
Yes, please do.
So we have stories from our culture that we tell to learn lessons, and every time you tell them, they might be a little bit different. You might forget certain parts or decide to emphasize certain parts. But different people have different perspectives. So there's not just one way to tell a story, because the story is a recollection of something that happened in the time before, and not something that's written down as fixed. So I'm going to tell you a story about the origin of the world.
Oh.
And a long time ago, they say that all of the living things lived above the sky vault, above the stars. And they lived there for a while, and that was fine. but eventually there just became too many of them. So they started running out of room, and they started looking for other places where they could go. And they thought that down in the on the earth, in the middle land between the sky vault and the underworld, might be a place. But there was no land there. It was all water. So they sent down Beaver's grandchild, the water beetle, to see if that she could find any land. So the water beetle went down to the earth where there was just water and swam around and couldn't find any dry place to crawl up on. So what she did is she went down to the bottom of the water and she got a little piece of mud and put it on her back. And as she came to the surface, that mud started spreading out and forming a large island. And but it was too wet. It was too muddy. So the turkey vulture came down to look to see if there was any place dry. And there was no place dry. But as the turkey vulture flew, the flapping of the wings started to dry out the land. And so the turkey vulture circled around the land for a long time, and the beating of the wings started to make it dry out. But eventually the turkey vulture got tired and started flying too close to the ground. And sometimes her wings would flap down and touch the ground, and this would make valleys in the ground. And then as the wings flapped back up, that became the high places, the mountains. And it's in these mountainous places, mountains and valleys places, is where the Cherokee homeland became. Eventually the land was dry enough, and it was held to the sky vault by 4 cords at the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. And these 4 cords hold the sky vault to the earth, or hold the earth to the sky vault and keep it from sinking down into the ocean. So all of the animals and the other creatures came down to the earth and spread out. And they say that as long as we speak our Cherokee language and sing our songs and dance our dances, the earth will stay suspended from the sky vault. But when we lose our language and lose our dances and songs, those cords will snap and the land will sink back into the ocean.
Oh.
Oh. Oh.
That's the story of creation.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Tim.
Well, don't. So we need to learn these stories, and we need to pass them on because they tell us things that are important, things we need to remember.
Exactly.
And that was the other thing I wanted to ask you, Tim, because you're right, language and the stories and what happened at the time go together. Like, for us, if we recite an old name like Tangaro, which is the name of one of our mountains, our sacred mountains, there's all these stories that are surrounded by that mountain that we need to relearn, so that we know when we talk about our sacred mountain, Tangaro, we know the story, our gods and everything that happens with that mountain, because we believe that they are part of, like our river. The river is me, I am the river, and the river is me. The same thing in our language. When we speak our language, it has that full meaning. When we say it in English, it doesn't.
Right.
But Cherokee would be like that too, would it? When you speak your language.
Yes.
I
think there's a lot lost in translation, and there's one of the interesting things I learned, one of these aha moments in the immersion class last week was this idea of opposites. So if I asked you, what's the opposite of up?
Excuse me, what's the
opposite of up?
Down.
Down. What's the opposite of white?
Black.
What's the opposite of left?
Right.
Okay, so on and on and on. So we teach this to children in, in kindergarten, very early in school. And I think the reason we teach the concept of opposite is not that opposite in itself is an important concept, but it teaches about reasoning and about comparison and about relationship. It teaches evaluation and skills like that are more important. But what the point was that they were trying to align the Cherokee Immersion School curriculum to the state standards in education, and they realized that there's not a concept of opposite in Cherokee language.
Wow.
So we don't think about things as opposite. We think about things in relationship, but not as opposites.
Oh, wow.
And we don't have a concept of perfection, like pervades Western thought about, there's an ideal form of something, or there's a perfect score, or there's a perfect way to be. And these are concepts that just don't make sense in translation. And you can squeeze a word into meaning that, or you can describe that idea in Cherokee, but it's not part of the way of thinking about things. So in Cherokee, you would describe things in relation to other similar concepts, but there's not an opposite. So what is up? It's not the opposite of down. You would say, well, it's a direction. Like down is a direction, and north is a direction, and east is a direction. But so up is the direction, and you might point up, or black. Well, black is a color. It's dark. It's not blue. It's not red. It's not white. It's one of these really darkest colors. Right, so there's the idea of opposite doesn't really exist, but you can still evaluate, you can still describe things to get your point across. And this idea of perfection, I think, is also really interesting in Western culture. We have a dichotomy almost in everything, and I think this is probably one of the reasons why we have such a problem with colonization in the world, is because the Europeans came in, and there's a right and there's a wrong, and obviously they were right and the indigenous people were wrong, and the indigenous people didn't have this concept of so clear of right and wrong. So I'm imagining that back in those days, they just didn't understand this idea about the Europeans coming in and saying things were wrong. Like, well, what do you mean they're wrong? They're different, but before you know it, the Europeans came through and dominated everything because they were just so steadfast in being correct about everything.
Right.
And I don't know, it's just an interesting idea about why certain cultures are the colonizers and others are the colonized. I mean, you almost can't fight against it in a way. If your enemy knows they're right and you don't have a strong opinion, then you almost have to become like them in the opposite to be able to resist. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Another thing when it comes to the language is that I know a lot of people will want to know how to say something in the Cherokee language, and because we have dictionaries nowadays that will go from usually English to Cherokee or Cherokee to English, they'll look up a word and they think it means just what it does in English. And I had a discussion like this when I was at the Rome, Georgia powwow last year with another Cherokee elder out there, and we were talking about the word snake, which is something I can live without. I'm absolutely horrified of snakes. But he was pointing out that, when people look up this word, they think it just means snake. And then in our Gadua dialect, it's pronounced inada.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, actually, it doesn't mean snake. It translates out word for word into English, something that climbs up. And
okay.
like a tree like a snake can climb a tree, it climbs up.
Right.
So that's what that word actually means, inada. And he says a lot of people aren't aware of that because they just think, oh, well, that word means snake, when actually it means, it doesn't say snake at all. It's just something that crawls up. And this is why the military still to this day, and we used it when I was in Vietnam, used our indigenous languages for code. And I know the famous Navajo code talkers are known from World War II, but our indigenous languages have been used in almost every war since then. So I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, the online word lists that are available now and they're really word lists like glossaries as opposed to dictionaries, because they just give, an English word and a Cherokee word, an English word and a Cherokee word. So a good example is the word, like suppose you want to say friend in Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you mean my friend as in mashu is my friend?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would be ginali. Do you mean I'm talking to you, mashu, Wade is my friend. So if I say Wade is my friend to you, but Wade is not here, I would say Wade oginali. If I would say mashu and... Oh, that's not a good example. If I were to say, somebody who's not here, David and Wade are friends, I would say David Wade unalei. So the word friend changes depending on, like a verb. You conjugate it. The word, all of the family relationships change depending on if you're talking about my father, your father, his father, her father, their father. They all change. If you're talking directly to the father, that's a different word. So it becomes difficult to have a direct dictionary, like a correspondence between words without an understanding of the grammar of the language. And that's something that we're hoping to resolve by making the Cherokee English Dictionary available online so that people can understand the language better as opposed to just trying to fit Cherokee words into English sentences, which is mostly what I think people a lot of times do now. It's better than nothing. I mean, it's a little cultural flavoring. It's a little Cherokee cultural flavoring, which is important and good for people who don't have a full grasp of the language, but it's limited.
Yes, it is. I'm going to mention that if anybody would like to call in and have a question, our telephone number is area code 718-506-1564. Again, the number is area code 718-506-1564. I thought I'd put that in should anybody want to give us a call and have questions about the language. So, Tim, now that you've gone through this and you're working on the dictionary and you've gone through this immersion course and you're really good with the syllabary, when is your school opening up? You're welcome.
Oh boy, I don't know how many people would want to come to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to learn Cherokee.
Well, we're going to be up in that area, actually in the month of May, so we just might drop in on you.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Doreen and I have an announcement that, you want to announce it, Doreen, or would you like for me to go ahead?
No, you're fine, Mashu.
Okay. Doreen and I have been accepted to attend the United Nations in May in New York City to present in the Indigenous Peoples Permanent Forum, where Indigenous rights and issues are to be discussed. And so we'll be going there. And that's also where we're going to debut our company called Two Feathers International Consultancy, where we work with tribes all over the world on decolonization programs, and just what we're talking about, Tim, about preserving language and tradition and culture, and work with all these peoples where we can do programs for each individual tribes, to help them with that. So that's our news.
Yeah. But just in regard to, I think earlier you were talking about your total immersion, because for me and my family, that's the only way we could learn and learn it well, because you have to live it. You have to experience language, or our language anyway, and we have some really good tools that we use. Do you have some language teaching tools to learn Cherokee?
There's some. I have this Cherokee beginning Cherokee book. There's some that are available in draft form that some contacts are working on. So I've been editing a Cherokee language textbook. Really just kind of reviewing, I guess, would be a better word for it, looking for consistency and clarity and things like that. So I've been helping with one of those. I haven't given it's Michael Joyner's project. I haven't given him any of my comments yet, but hope to do that soon. And that actually helps me, because when you critically review something for clarity, you can it's learning. You learn it too. You don't have to be an expert to be able to review something. If you view it as a learner, is it clear for learning? I think that's a valuable thing to do. There's some other fora that are available on online, like Facebook. I'm in a couple groups with language. You can ask first language speakers how to say things. You can support other people in pointing out tools online. There's videos available from Western Carolina University. Has a language Cherokee program that has some really neat videos that are teaching different concepts. And then you hear about, you borrow tools from other language programs. One of the interesting concepts that I saw was the idea of a language nest. So the idea is that you pick a part in your house, preferably one that you spend a lot of time in, and you just make it a language nest. And so the idea is that you use the language as much as possible whenever you're in that space. And so, for example, you might pick the kitchen. So in my kitchen, at my house, we have the kitchen, and we have a kitchen island countertop in the middle that has some stools where people sit to eat, and we do our homework from school there, and we have dinner there and breakfast. So the idea is that you would fill the language nest with the language. So you might put notes on everything, like plates would be Toledo, and you might put, the word for water on the sink, which would be ama, and you might put phrases like, could you hand me the something or other? So you put these phrases up, and then you just try, whenever you're in that space, to use the language as much as possible. And then when you are doing really well with that smaller space, then you let the nest grow. So you spread out to another room in the house, maybe. And so the idea is that you get familiar with different concepts that you can use in a certain situation, and then you expand in new situations.
You know, Tim, one of the reasons that I went to when I was over in New Zealand last year, I was there for 3 months, is that I know that the Maori people have really revived their language within the last 25, 30 years. So one of my goals was to bring back some teaching tools that we could apply to our Cherokee language, because I had seen some of these tools that they had used, and I don't know what the Maori name is for the bag of building blocks.
They're called rako mashu. They're coloured rods, and the actual program of learning is called ātārangi, where we use these coloured blocks to, as a tool for a group of about, we don't have any more than about 6 people, and we'd say the colour for white is ma. So we'd say, he rako ma, this is the white rod or white stick, and pass it to the next person. The next person would say exactly the same thing, go round and round till we got it, and then we'd add to it, like the colour for black is pango. So he rako pango, then we'd pick up the white rod, he rako ma, and then we'd pass them both over till we just, built our language. And that would happen, like, you'd do that for about 2 or 3 hours a session, have a break. We always, as adults, loved being around the kids, all our young ones, because it's easy for kids to speak our language. It just rolls out of them. And it's just a little bit difficult for us as adults, but as we get older, I guess we're just shy to speak our language. But our kids can bring it out of us. So the kids are always an important part of learning, because it's easy for us to, even if they're only commands, but speak to our kids in Maori than it is for me to talk to someone my age.
But the good thing about this teaching tool that she's talking about, Tim, is that it can be used for any language.
Right.
Yeah. So we brought one of those back over here. So,
guys, it's coming up on break. Would you like to take a break?
That sounds wonderful.
All right.
Ski chin.
Kia ora.
Join us on Just Us Radio Network for our shows Inflowment, Imagineers, Numbers in Time, the Indigenous People's Voice, One Point of View, and the People's Round Table. Check out our website for information about upcoming shows. Just ask Google to find Just Us Radio Network and you will find links to our website and to our blog talk and Facebook pages, as well as to our podcast, where you can subscribe for automatic downloads.
Mashu, you back? Kia ora koutou, everyone.
I am back. O te oe, kia ora.
Good. Oh, and welcome back to Tim, our special guest today from Pittsburgh. Is that right, Tim? Philadelphia.
Yes, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. I knew it was a P. And he's been talking to all of us, and I'm just so interested in it, about Cherokee language, because that's your expertise. Tim, that's right, you're a linguist as well.
What was that?
That your expertise is your Cherokee language as well. You're also a linguist.
Well, no, I'm not a professional linguist. I'm a professional ecologist, but I've studied a number of languages.
Yes, I was going to ask you if you've learned any over this side, in the Pacific. No?
What? Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand you.
She's wondering if you had learned any of the languages in the Pacific.
No, I haven't.
Not yet.
Just Romance and Germanic languages.
Oh.
When we my mother was admitted to hospital today. She fell and broke her hip, and she's going to have surgery tomorrow. She's doing good. But there's a lot of foreign nurses, that work there. So I ended up speaking Filipino to her main nurse.
Oh wow!
Today, I used to translate for about 8 different languages at one time. I'm not fluent in any of them anymore, but I think the younger you are, the easier it is to learn languages. But I've always been the type where I would function well in like an immersion type of situation where they spoke nothing but a language. I think that's where I would probably excel in. as opposed to what you and I were talking about before, Tim, where you go online and you hear how they pronounce things, and then you have to figure out after that, like, when can I use this? That particular question, and then what tense, So I think that would really, really be a good situation. And I think you have some acreage up there in Pennsylvania. I think that would be a great idea for you. You're welcome, Tim.
Possibly. We could maybe swing that.
Come and spend a weekend with Tim and your Cherokee immersion courses.
Well,
Sorry.
That's okay. We'll be building a sweat lodge soon.
See, now we were brought up, my family said that our people never went into sweats. We only went to water.
Right.
And that the closest thing that we had to what most people think of a sweat lodge is the OC, which was always outside of the house. But that was used, and our family always said it was used to cook in during today. And it was the closest thing to a sweat that would be in there is if someone was sick, and it was for immediate family only. But then the other interesting thing is that's where we slept, was in the OC. They rarely slept in the house. And you pull the coals out, and that's where people slept, was in the OC.
Yeah, my understanding is the OC was a winter house, and then in the summer they would have something more open. And the modern word for stove, like a cooking stove, is OC because it's something you build a fire inside.
Mm-hmm.
So Cherokees didn't have iron cooking stoves, and so then when they needed a word for these things, we have this sort of structure you stick a fire inside. Well, that's an OC.
Now, Tim, are you building a traditional Cherokee home on your property up in Pittsburgh?
Maybe. I don't know. I have a variety of projects, so maybe I'll might be interested in building something like a council house.
Oh, okay.
Which I think that would be neat to have a council house. I don't know if I would hold a council. But
let me know, and I'll come up and represent Bird Clan.
Well, the thing is, this stomp dance I went to last Saturday at the ceremonial grounds. It just started pouring down rain right at the end of it, and so we finished it out. So I asked the grounds leader, why don't they build a council house to have the dances in? And he said that nowadays none of the stomp grounds today hold their dances indoors. They always have them outside with arbors around for the different clans. And part of the problem with building a council house is, he said, everyone would have to fast for 4 days ahead of time, and you can't use any metal, and there's all sorts of things that make it a challenge to build something like that. So. Yeah,
but on the other hand, that still has to be kept up where people know where it is, so that doesn't get forgotten as well.
Right. Yeah, if you don't build any new ones, no one will remember how to do it.
Exactly. See, and that's my thing. My dream is always to have a good amount of acreage where we could build like a living village, like what they have in North Carolina and also out in Oklahoma around Tahlequah. And that would be good not only to teach non-indigenous people about our culture, but also to teach our young, of our own people. I think things like that are very important, that we maintain that and show how these things, are built. It's like a living, learning situation where you could do that.
I think that those are really useful tools for teaching, these replicas of villages, 300-year-old villages, because they really kind of help you understand how people related to each other.
Exactly.
And without that, you can describe it in a book, but it's really helpful to kind of see it and go inside these buildings and see how they, where would you sit down or stand up? Where would you cook things? Maybe some buildings you don't cook in and others you do. So I think that's the kind of thing is really, really valuable to be able to get a feeling for how people really kind of got along with each other on a day-to-day basis.
I agree with you 500% on that, and I think it would be absolutely choice to have a situation like that where these things, and have our elders actually be a part of it, where they can teach, what they know, and actually go through maybe a step by step, and have what you need, like the woven willow for the frame, and then you cover it with the mud, not the mud, but the red clay, and all of that, and show how to thatch the roof.
Yep.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention our call-in number again, just in case you've missed it before. If anybody would like to call in with a question for Tim, the area code is 718-506-1564. Again, that number is area code 718-506-1564. Do you have another story, Tim, you could tell us?
Oh, I could tell.
I know you posted 2 really good ones.
Did I?
Yes, you did, and I posted them all over. But
yeah, that's right. That's right.
I did give you credit.
Well, there's another good. There's lots of good stories. But another story I like to tell is about how we got the fire.
Ah.
And this, you might notice. Well, I won't. I'll save the punchline for later. So after the people had come down to the earth and all the animals had come down to the earth, we had everything was going really well, but it was really cold in the wintertime. And especially the people, the human beings, had a problem getting cold in the wintertime. And all the animals, they didn't seem to have a problem with this, but the human beings had a problem with being cold in the wintertime. So this was back in the day before the humans had started abusing the animals and taking too many of them and not being respectful of them when they went hunting. So in this time, the animals and the plants and the human beings were all cooperating with each other, and they were holding council together. So about this time, the provider, Uneit Lanahi, sent down a bolt of fire from the sun in lightning. So some people say that Nada, the sun, is the heart of the provider. Some people would say the creator, but our word is not really the creator, it's the provider. So a bolt of lightning came down and struck a sycamore tree in the middle of an island in the river. And this island was guarded by 7 thunder beings. And the thunder beings wouldn't let the animals get the fire to bring to the people. So in the base of this sycamore, a hollow sycamore tree was burning this fire. The animals decided that if they got that fire, the warmth from the sun, Ajila, this fire, the people wouldn't be cold, and they could also use it for cooking and things like that. So it was first decided to send the strongest animal to go get the fire. And so the bear decided that the bear would go swim across that river and go get the fire. So the great white bear swam across the river and charged through the thunder beings and was trying to pick up the fire, but couldn't get the fire in its paws. It didn't have fingers to grab a hold of the fire, and it was burning, and it stayed too long close next to the fire, and finally it got chased off by the thunder beings and had to swim across. But it had been by the fire so long that its fur got singed black, and so nowadays bears have black fur because they got singed in the fire. So then it was decided that maybe they needed an animal that could sneak across. So the rat snake swam across the water and slithered across the ground and tried to grab some of the fire, but couldn't. It kind of went up the outside of the tree and down into the hollow tree, and couldn't get to the fire, but also turned all black. And so the rat snakes are black today, and it couldn't get the fire. Next, so the strongest animal couldn't get it, and the sneakiest animal couldn't get it. What about the most beautiful animal? What if the most beautiful animal could get it? So, well, of course, the most beautiful animal in all the world was the rainbow crow. The rainbow crow had beautiful rainbow-colored feathers and the most beautiful song it would sing. And so the rainbow crow flew over into the top of the sycamore tree and down to get the fire, but couldn't get close enough because it got choked by all the smoke, and ended up flying away. And when it came back, it had destroyed its voice. So nowadays, crows only sound like like they're coughing, because their voice has been ruined by the smoke, and their feathers are all covered in soot, so they're black. But you can still see the rainbow if the light hits the feathers just right. Can't you?
Yeah.
So this happened. The deer tried, being the fastest animal. The deer couldn't get the fire, and finally, all that was left was the little water spider. And the water spider asked, "I can try. Would you let me try?" And all of the animals thought, "No, you're too small. What can you do? You're just a little water spider. How are you going to get the fire?" But they had run out of all the other options, so they decided that, well, they don't have anything to lose, so the water spider can go and try herself. So the water spider skittered across the surface of the water and kind of scampered across the ground. But before, at the riverbank, she had wove a basket and tied it to her back and lined the basket with clay from the river. So she snuck over to the fire and got a small coal and put it inside her pot on her basket, inside her basket, and covered it over with some more mud. And then she started off towards the riverbank. And then the thunder beings saw the water spider getting away with the coal of fire, and they tried to get her, but she darted this way and they darted that way, and they tried to squish her with their feet, and they couldn't get her. And finally, she went and dove under the water. And the thunder beings said, "Oh, well, that's fine. Everyone knows that fire can't survive underwater. The fire will go out, so we don't have to worry about it. We have done our job and saved the fire." But the water spider was able to swim across the water, and the fire, the heat from the fire, had sealed that pot shut, so it didn't get wet. The fire didn't go out. And she climbed out the other side and was able to break the pot open and start a fire from that one little coal that she brought. And so our most powerful being in all the world is, and you can see this on Cherokee iconography all over the place. Cherokee people to this day use the water spider motif. They have tattoos of water spider. You can buy it on T-shirts, on pots, and woven in baskets. Is the symbol of the water spider with the fire symbol, the 4 crossed logs at the center in a circle, is the symbol of the water spider. And a couple things to know that I take from this story are that even the smallest creatures and the smallest beings have something to offer. And sometimes it's the the beings that are between two worlds that have special gifts that can give different perspectives, different ways of doing things that are the most powerful and the most valuable.
Exactly.
Wow.
Very good, Tim. My son has a water spider tattooed right on his back.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, when you were talking, one of our proverbs in our language is he iti, he pounamu. Although it is small, it is greatness. And that's what that reminded me of, your story. It's a lovely story. You know, the smallest things, from the smallest things can come great things.
Yes, yes. And I like this story too because it's a special message for our two-spirit people that are these are the people that live between what the Western culture calls the male and female gender. So these would be our gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people. Are valued in our indigenous cultures in North America, and many of our indigenous people have forgotten about this due to the colonizers. But it's a good story for our two-spirited people that we have a place and we have special gifts that other people don't have, and it's part of our cultures to value the place that people have in society, their relationship to each other, and not to try to squeeze people into a place that they aren't, but to find what the place what the values they do have and make room for that.
Exactly. That's one thing that all of our indigenous cultures have, and there's a lot of respect for our two-spirited people of all tribes. The responsibilities and the duty changes, of course, a little bit from tribe to tribe and from culture to culture. And as we've stated before on this program, is that one of the biggest mistakes that non-indigenous people make is that they group us all together. We're all supposed to look alike, dress alike, speak alike, and there's nothing further from the truth. Every tribal people on Turtle Island, which is the whole North American continent, has their own culture, has their own language and or a dialect of that language, and everything about their culture is determined by what's available to them geographically in their area. And that's from the type of home you have, the type of clothes you wear, the medicine, even the cologne, and everything is that different. But we have some similarities, but even greater differences. Thank you for bringing that up, Tim.
You're welcome. Hoa.
We could sit here and listen to you tell stories all night. You're a really pretty good storyteller. I'm just imagining you sitting there, and if you're not sitting there like this, don't tell me because you're going to ruin my image. Sitting there in your leggings and your moccasins, and really nice beaded bandolier bag, and you either have your hair cut like I do, where it's really back old-time Cherokee, or a turban, and you're sitting there smoking on your clay pipe telling the story by the fire.
Exactly.
See? Talk about setting a good ambiance there. So we're just sitting by the fire here.
Exactly.
But it's a nice thing about our Indigenous stories, because I'm not a storyteller, Tim. I wish I was. I love listening to them. But I will, at some stage, make sure that we've got someone from over here that will tell beautiful stories. But a lot of the Indigenous stories have all of these underlying messages.
Yes.
Yeah.
At all levels. No, it's not just one message. that you'll get, or they'll tell you in the end. But there's all these different levels of messages for us to learn. It's just so amazing. But I think that awareness only comes from having a good understanding of our language, of our traditions, and a good basis of our history, so that you can understand, well, this is what they meant, this is what they mean, and a lot of it's still relevant today.
Right. And you have to listen to the stories from lots of different people, too, because it's like if you asked, 4 people what happened, they all witnessed a crime, and you ask 4 witnesses what happened, they're all going to have a slightly different version of what happened from their perspective. And so by asking them all what happened, then you get a fuller view of what really happened. They're all wrong in a way, in the sense that it's not complete, but by listening to many of them, you get a better idea. So when you listen to stories and you tell stories, I think you have to recognize that your story is not the story. It's a view on the story and of what happened. So I think of these stories as things that really happened. These are part of of events that are passed down to us. And when we tell a story, we are picking a perspective to tell the story from. And so we're going to emphasize different things, and we're going to leave out parts that, maybe don't pertain to the story, the message you want to send. And then you find new messages in them. You can analyze them. You can think, wow, I wonder if this means, something that I hadn't thought of before, or that you hadn't heard of before. So these stories are really powerful, I think.
And then also some of the stories that have been told from the long ago time and have carried through. If we, like old way, we would be sitting around with our elders and they would be telling us these stories. And they would be telling us these stories to teach us certain lessons and to point out certain things. Our parables, you might say, for our Maori. The thing is that you may hear the same story 15, 20 times in about a month or a month and a half, and you hear the story so often that you can actually, a lot of people can tell these stories word for word as it's been told. And if you're sitting with your elders, you don't get up and say, well, I've already heard this before, and to walk away. You don't do that. You will sit there and you will listen. That's considered to be very rude.
Right.
But
my kids, they can tell these stories.
Mm-hmm. But the other thing, if you sit there and you listen to the stories, it's basically just the same thing Tim had said. Then you go out afterwards, and then a few of your friends sit there and you start talking about what you took away from that story, and chances are each one is going to bring a different point out, that they picked out something different than the person next to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very good. But the Maori people are great storytellers as well in a traditional sense, and their stories are also on on a lot of levels. And I think that's something really unique to our tribal and indigenous people of today, that we still, even though we have different tribes and we're located all over the world, we still have that art of storytelling. And I think that's very important and one of the cores of our tribal and indigenous lives.
I think the problem with written stories is, European cultures, other cultures have stories, of course, also. But I don't think they have the life that our stories have, because people expect them to be the way they were written down by the Brothers Grimm, for example. And they expect that only certain people are able to tell stories. Authors or Disney is able to tell stories, and ordinary people don't tell stories, they read stories or they watch stories. And because ordinary people don't tell stories, they don't have the same life. And you don't think about them as having these lessons as much, I think. They could have the same lessons. All of those Brothers Grimm fairy tales or stories have some kind of lesson in them. But I think that they get lost because you only hear it one way. And so the layers of meaning are lost.
But it's also, I think that this is you actually see the person telling the story and you see the different actions that they take. Because we have some very animated storytellers, and the facial expressions and stuff. And I have some very good storytellers, traditional way actually suck you up into the story with the way that they're telling it. And it's like you're actually living it, and you're a part of it. I know when I grow up, I'm going to be a storyteller.
Hey, mashu, tall stories?
I didn't say how tall they were going to be, and I didn't say how truthful they were going to be, but I'm going to be a good storyteller. Borderline historian.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful that you really worked hard doing that. And what I'm looking forward to, Tim, is listening to you tell a story in the Cherokee language from beginning to end. And then, of course, this will be by the fire, and then tell it in English for those who don't understand it, And then you're probably about 2 or 3 days away from that.
I would love to be able to tell stories in Cherokee language. I would. It's really special to hear long stretches of Cherokee language. I think in prayers and in even conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's a really beautiful language. A lot of people say languages are beautiful, but I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. English, I don't know. I imagine some person from the middle of Africa is like, "Oh, beautiful! English is such a beautiful language," but we don't think about it as being beautiful because it's just ordinary to us, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I grew up with. I would love to be able to tell these stories in Cherokee. I think that would be great. And the thing about studying Cherokee is that it's so different than English in the sense of it being so verb-based. It's a polysynthetic language, so one word could be a whole sentence. And you add meaning by inserting parts in the middle of words, for example. Someone described a Cherokee word being like, what do they describe it as? Kind of like being the center being the fire, and then there's layers around the word that go on the outside to build up the word. So you can have these rather long words that are somewhat complicated or very complicated in their meaning. So it's difficult to master that.
I was in a conversation with Lee Lewis, who is another person who's very good with the language, relatively close to me. We got in a conversation. I don't know if you were part of that conversation or not, Tim. I know there was one other person, and I don't remember. But I was always taught that Cherokee is spoken like the other languages of the world, and English is the only backward language in the world. And so, and I talked a little bit about this to Tim last night. A lot of people that are being taught the languages today are being taught it like English is spoken, which, where I was brought up, takes away from our language. But Lee brought out a good point that it seems like all languages today have been influenced by English. And just in something simple like to say good night, the way I was brought up, you actually say night good because you always state what you're talking about, and then the rest of the sentence describes it. So in the way I was brought up, we say Sinoyi Osta. Whereas a lot of people that are learning the language in today have the English twist to it, and they're going Osta Sinoyi. They're saying good night just like it would be in English. And I realized that not a lot of people speak it that day, and after talking to Tim last night, because he works this Cherokee magic on people, we realized that, it's good to learn the language the way that they speak it today, and then we can, once we get proficient, then we can turn it around, and use it for our own dialect, because our dialect has different words for the same thing as, say, another dialect, and there's three dialects to our language. And then we could do the same thing, and turn it around where we could speak it, in the old way. But, see, in talking to Tim for the last 2 days, I've gotten 2 challenges in my life that I'm going to have to work on. You're a bad influence, Tim.
Great. It's great, Mashu. Just with that old language, I grew up, hearing our Maori language as it was spoken by our elders, and that's, from the 1960s, 70s. They still spoke our old language, which was more around concepts and short, sharp phrases. Today, of course, it's changed. We almost lost it. It's come back, but it's come back and changed, and it's more transliteration.
Yes.
So it's become a new language. We never had words for computers. These are all new words that have come into our language, and although I think our language teachers at the time tried to make it as natural and as close to the old language as they could, it doesn't sound like it flows. And I do remember hearing the old language. One of the first written books for our Maori people, our language, was of course the Bible. With all the missionaries that came. Right. But when you read the Bible written at that time, you can actually read it for a little while, and you can get into the flow of it, and you understand it. If you know a few words in Maori, you can understand what they're saying. But to open, say, the Bible today with the new language we've got, it's impossible for me to understand what they're saying. So the new language, I'd have to sit in the classroom and learn it, like they are in some of our universities, our primary or secondary schools. Our young ones have picked it up really fast, the new language, to the point, though, where they're correcting some of our elders that have still got the old way of speaking.
Oh.
So I don't know how we teach them, all that humbleness and because that comes with respect, and that's why we can't quite separate our language from our traditions, because you learn respect and all of those values alongside language.
That's all in one. That's all in one.
Right. And some of our young ones haven't quite got it yet. But it'll come. I'm sure it'll come.
Another thing too, Doreen, is that languages naturally change and evolve as times go on, too. And so I think that's a part of it. But because, like we don't have words for computer or anything like that either traditionally, so we have to transliterate as well. But I think all languages do that to a degree, is that they all change as time goes on. But it's like with our language though, and I can't say because I'm not even near fluent in Maori, but like say we have words that have double meanings. It depends on how you pronounce them, like the word ama and ama. They're spelled the same. One means water, one means salt. The word kamama or kamama, one means butterfly, the other one means elephant. So with us too, it all depends on how you pronounce it. So that's an extra little twist for our Cherokee language.
That's right.
Hey, Tim, you wouldn't by chance be able to pull another story out of your hat, would you? Because
let's see. I could probably, let me think.
I know you posted one about the eagle feathers and also one about the fish. Everybody wants to hear your stories. They're typing in here. You're our official Indigenous People's Voice storyteller from tonight on, okay?
Let me think. I can tell a story. I haven't heard this one in a while. This is a good story. This is a story about the crooked-faced boy.
Oh, huh.
Let me think if I can remember the important parts and not mess it up too badly. So, a long time ago, well, everybody knows that the Cherokee people are the most beautiful people in the world.
Oh, huh. Good one. Yeah.
And, well, we used to be really conceited about it, unlike today.
Exactly.
And it got to the point that it was so bad that if there was ever any baby that was born with any deformity, you had to put it out in the woods and send it back to the earth and let it die. Well, in those days, we didn't feel like a baby was really alive until a certain number of days or weeks passed. So when a baby could show expression, then it was considered to be alive. So, but if it wasn't perfect, when it was first born, the mother had to take it out and abandon it before it showed expression. So what happened was a young mother had a baby, and it had a kind of a crooked face. Some say maybe it had a hair lip or a cleft palate. And some say it just had kind of a crooked face. And so the mother was supposed to take it out into the woods and abandon it. So she took, as was her duty, she took it out into the woods, and she just couldn't set it down on the ground. She couldn't leave it behind. And so she hid it under her shirt, and she snuck it back into the village. And she kept it hidden long enough that it grew old enough that was old enough to show expression, and so they weren't allowed to kill it anymore, because then it was a human being. And so people were very upset with her, but they couldn't do anything about it because now the baby was actually alive. So the baby grew up in the village playing with the other children, grew up into a boy, and as the boy grew older, he was always the brunt of all the jokes because he was the ugly boy with the crooked face. And all the kids made fun of him. And they would beat him up with sticks. And he would come back crying to his mother, saying, Mommy, H.E., none of the other children like me. They are always making fun of me. I can't stand it anymore. And he ran away. He ran off into the woods. He ran far, far off into the woods. And the mother was very afraid because there were monsters that lived out in the woods that would tear a person up from limb to limb and eat them. So, but he told his mother, it couldn't be any worse than this. This is horrible. I have to get out of here. So he left. And he went out running in the woods, and before you know it, he ran right into one of these monsters. And it was a big, hairy monster, and it screamed at him. And usually what happens is that the human runs into the monster roars, the human runs, then the monster goes and chases down the human and tears it limb from limb and then eats it. So, but the boy was just so used to being abused that this monster, he's like, you know what, monster, if you're going to tear me up and eat me, you just go right ahead. And the monster says, "Rawr, why don't you run away from me? Why don't you run away and see if you can outrun me and go back to your village?" And the boy said, "I don't want to go back to my village. If my end is right now and you're going to catch me and tear me up anyway, just go ahead and get it over with. I don't care." Well, the monster didn't really know what to do about that. And so he said, "Why are you so sad? What's so bad about that village?" And then the boy said, "Well, they all hate me because I've got this crooked face, and they're so mean to me. And everyone beats me up anyway." And the monster actually started feeling sorry for the little boy. And so they kind of became friends. And they wandered around in the woods, and then the monsters met the other monsters and told them about this boy. And so they were going around in the woods for a while, and then a sickness came down on the people, and they didn't have the right medicine. But the boy had a vision that he should go to the place where the sun comes out from the underworld at dawn, and that when he got to that place in the east, by fasting for 7 days and 7 nights and hiking off to the east, there, right at the opening where the sun comes up, there would be the medicine. And so the boy set off to the village and told the people that what would happen, and they all ran away. They were too afraid of the monsters to go and get the medicine with the boy. And so the boy went off with the monsters, and they fasted for 7 days. They hiked for 7 days and 7 nights towards the rising sun, and on the 7th morning they reached the place, and just as the sun came out and before the opening closed, they saw the medicine plants there and were able to gather them up. And something happened on the way back, is that the compassion that the boy showed for the monsters and the compassion that they showed for each other, those monsters started to turn back into people, human beings, because what had happened to them is that they had once been human beings, but because other people treated them so horribly, they turned into monsters and had to go off into the woods to live. So they all went back to the village and delivered the medicines to the people, and this is the tobacco and the cedar and the knowledge of the ways to use these plants.
Do you happen to know the name of the monsters?
I don't remember the name of the monsters.
As you're telling this story, I'm wondering if it could have been the Chulkalu, or what, as our Cherokee word for what today is called Bigfoot.
I asked about that, and I don't think they were. I don't think that's the name.
Because we have lots of stories about them as well.
Yes.
Chulaku.
So again, the interesting thing about this story is that it teaches us about not being too conceited, and it teaches us about how the beings that are different are sometimes the ones that have the answers.
Yes.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you Cherokee learnt that lesson. The most beautiful people in the world, of course, are Maori.
Well, you see, even though our Cherokee people are still the most beautiful, we're very humble about it today. We just let it happen, don't we? Don't we, Jim?
Exactly.
That's a great story. It teaches us.
And these are the stories that need to be told. You know, I wish our people still lived more in our communities. You know, like in the old days, where everybody could hear these stories.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of our stories have parallels in the old European fables.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a tortoise and the hare story that's very similar. It's a tortoise or a turtle, a box turtle, and a rabbit have a race, and you know the rabbit gets tricked by the turtle and loses.
Mm-hmm.
And the details differ about how it was done, but the basics are the same.
Do we have a question? I think my cousin Two Dog has a question. Is that correct?
Has his hand up.
Chimmy, did you see anything? Do we have a question from him? Oh, he's live.
What's up?
Oh, Two Dog, Gili Tali. Tohiju.
Oh, what's that? I was just listening to your whole show, my cousin, and you got a great storyteller there, by the way. And I want to say, one more time, one more big show. I appreciate what you're putting out there.
Oh wow, Ski. Well, when you have guests as good as you were our guest last week, and then we got Tim this week, and I think we have it's almost like family to me. From my very first trip to New Zealand, Doreen scheduled.
We've got Johnny Snowden, Johnny Snowden next week. So Johnny
kia ora, Doreen. How you doing, hon?
I'm good, thank you.
Another great show. I've listened to the whole show, and I got a question for the guest. Does he know about the story of how the rabbit lost his tail?
Let's see, the story of how the rabbit lost his tail. I have a lot of feedback somehow. I don't remember that story.
Oh, hopefully you can. I was just curious if you knew it, my friend.
I know the story about how the possum's tail is bare.
Yeah, if we got time, I'd like to hear that.
Sure. This is so in the Cherokee tradition, the rabbit is the trickster.
Yes.
And so they were going to have a dance. The animals were going to have a dance, and the possum had the most beautiful tail and was so proud of its beautiful, fluffy, bushy tail. It was the envy of everybody. And so they decided they would teach the possum a lesson about being proud. And so Rabbit decided. Rabbit offered to do the possum's hair, to do it up in a nice do for the dance. And the possum was just so proud that the rabbit appreciated his beautiful tail so much. And it's beautiful, gorgeous fur and fluffy and luxurious fur on his tail. And the rabbit said, "You just lay down right there and close your eyes and relax, and I'm going to do this tail of yours up nice." So what the possum laid down, closed his eyes. The rabbit washed the hair on the tail, and as he was washing it, though, he had hidden in his paw a knife, and he cut that fur off the tail. But what he did right after he cut it is he wrapped a cord around the tail and tied it back on, so he wouldn't notice. So after a while, he finished grooming the possum and cutting all that hair off and tying it back on. And the possum, it said the possum, he could open his eyes now, and the possum was, just so thrilled with his tail. It looked so beautiful that it was time for the dance. So he went to the dance, and they had a special dance just for the possum. And the possum was doing his possum dance out there, and was dancing around the fire. And eventually that cord came loose, and everybody started seeing the hair fall off the possum's tail. And the possum didn't know this. The possum just kept dancing around the fire, and everybody started laughing. At first the possum thought that everyone was having such a good time watching him dance because he was such a good dancer and so handsome with his tail, being so well done by the rabbit. But eventually he looked back and noticed his naked tail. No fur on his tail at all, and he was so embarrassed that he just keeled over and froze. And that is how the possum lost his hair on his tail.
And played possum.
And played possum.
Oh, stop.
Hey guys, I'm going to play the outro song, and if you want to keep talking afterwards, just go ahead.
Okay, well, we've got about 2 minutes if we want to close now. I'd like to thank you so much, Tim, for coming on to the show tonight. You've been really great talking about the language and also storyteller, so that's really good. Again, as Doreen said, our guest next week is from Aotearoa, Johnny Snowden. And I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and listening to us tonight. Doreen, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Just ngā mihi aroha ki a koe, Tim. My thanks and to have you on today. Thank you. And Two Dog, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Nice to hear from you again. Kia ora koutou.
Thanks for coming on the show and listening tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you, Jim, for everything, and you too, Sheila, all of our cast here that's helping to put on this show. Sonoyo style,
way